Delivering this week's must-watch workplace storylines, this is Bloomberg Law's Punching In, for those of you listening in Washington and across the globe.
Hey folks, thanks for punching in with us for our special holiday episode this week. And of course, from myself and all of us here at Bloomberg Law, we hope you had a great Thanksgiving. Hope you have a Merry Christmas. Hope you have a happy holidays all around. So we here at Punching In are sort of naturally thinking about the holiday season, the Christmas season, in the workplace context. And that brings to mind, of course, a very hot topic around this time of year, holiday parties. We'll be having one here for the office. I think we're also having a smaller thing for the labor desk. I should actually know that a little bit better. I think we're supposed to bring cookies or baked goods or something. But in any case, I'm sure many of you will also be going to and having Christmas and holiday parties. So we have a guest on today's special episode to talk to us about those parties and some, let's say, related concerns. So our guest today is Jonathan Segal. Hey, John, how are you?
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So yeah, John has been a source of mine in the past. He's a labor and employment partner, Duane Morris. John's also on a select task force for harassment at the EEOC. He's even provided training to federal judges on harassment and workplace bias issues. And so we try to refrain from using the word expert just because there's so much opportunity to sort of abuse that. But John is certainly the perfect guy to talk to about holiday parties and the related concerns that HR, legal, sometimes even the employees, of course, have. And of course, John, what comes to mind when you bring all this up nowadays, of course, is the Me Too era, right? And the advent of we've seen a rise in litigation at the EEOC. We've covered that development. And certainly most of us, whether we're women or racial minorities or in any kind of minority category, are much more aware of sort of the dynamics of how these things play out in the workplace. So I imagine the conversations you're having, that employees are having, that companies are having are a bit different nowadays. So I just want to kind of start off broadly there. Tell me what you're seeing. What the change has been as folks have these conversations, the way people act. What kind of changes are you seeing in the Me Too era in terms of this holiday context in the workplace?
I appreciate the question because I'm not seeing many clients cancel holiday parties, which I think is a good thing. I think that's going a little far. I think you can still have stability without having bad behavior. What we are seeing is clients looking at the issue up front and saying, what can we do to make less likely that bad behavior will occur? Right. And rather than every January sort of having a telethon of plaintiff lawyers saying, were you groped, you're subject to other unacceptable conduct, if so dial X. Reality is there's been bad behavior at holiday parties for a long time. Right. The good news is that with realization of the seriousness of the sexual, racial, and other kinds of harassment, employers, to do what's right by their employees and to protect themselves, are issuing guardrails more upfront.
Right. We're definitely seeing folks sort of getting remedies. It definitely seems at a higher rate, and definitely more transparency for sure when those issues pop up. But I didn't mean to cut you off there, John. Go ahead.
No, I appreciate. No, you're absolutely right. Also, that when things go wrong, even if the employer takes appropriate preventive steps, if an employer becomes aware of bad behavior or an employee, even absent a complaint, they see employees grinding on the floor, they hear sexually explicit language, an employee complains to them. Doesn't have to be a complaint. They see, hear, become aware of it, they still need to react. But if the conclusion is there's been unacceptable conduct, even if it's not unlawful, I see more employers saying, we're not going to tolerate it. We're going to take prompt and proportionate corrective action. And it sends a message that even in the social context, and that's really important because so much of business inclusion is social inclusion. Even in the social context, if the behavior doesn't meet our standards, then there will be an appropriate penalty, which could range anywhere from a warning up to and including termination.
Right. That's sort of probably
to and including. Sorry about that.
No, that's all right. Yeah. No, I was going to say that's sort of why this context can get complicated at times, right? Because I mean, oftentimes you're in the office, maybe having your holiday party, but it's not exactly a squarely professional setting, right? People are dressed down, people are hanging out, chatting, having personal, not professional conversations. There's often alcohol, right? So there's a bit of a blurring there of the professional setting with a social setting, and that oftentimes creates some complexities. So you're saying you're not seeing many employers cancel their holiday parties, but you are seeing more folks try to sort of intervene when they become aware.
Including addressing the issue you just raised, which is making clear that even though there's a social component, whether it be on-site or off-site, it's still a professional event and people still need to act professionally. I see employers issuing guidance up front, reminding employees that the policies on harassing conduct apply.
Sort of ahead of the holiday party, just kind of sending out an email to the office, or?
Yep,
okay.
Exactly. Serving less alcohol, monitoring more closely. Oh, by the way, reminding employees that Jack Daniel's Jim Beam is no defense to bad conduct. So, and I think sometimes you need to spell it out so that no one has any doubt that, and we learned at DOC through a fair amount of really extensive study and through extensive study, and that included testimony that alcohol is a real risk factor, and people need to understand it's not a defense to bad behavior. Never.
Right.
And I think if people know that up front, and I think leaders play a key role here. If the leaders walking around and wobbly and slurring his or her speech, what's the message about that? So I think leadership plays a really key role here in modeling good behavior. I think people can have a nice time at a holiday party and enjoy each other in year end without being inebriated. Here's my view. I think you're going to see more thoughtful planning and responsiveness by employers. And I also think at the same time, you may see an increase in complaints because employees are more aware of their rights and therefore more inclined to raise them. What I hope that will mean is that people will raise concerns with issues that may fall in the gray, as opposed to things that are objectively, beyond the pale. But I do think you will still see a slight increase in claims, or often with HR.
Right.
So-and-so said it made me uncomfortable. So-and-so did make me uncomfortable, even with heightened planning and monitoring.
Right.
If I can throw one final thought in.
Of course.
It's a great model for employers to raise that you can have social inclusion and still not engage in tolerate harassing behavior. One of my biggest fears is that some men will say, I'm going to protect myself from harassment claims by avoiding women. There's a word for that. It's called discrimination. So the holiday party can really be a good setting to model what's appropriate interaction that can be used for other contexts, such as trips, meetings, and the like.
Gotcha. So using it as a way to sort of set an example and lay out a path forward. That makes a lot of sense.
You got it.
Yeah. So we'll definitely be tracking the EEOC's numbers, and we'll definitely be probing in to see if we can do some sort of collection by talking to folks like you and other experts to see if they're seeing some kind of a rise and any sort of different dynamics nowadays. As I said, in this new era where folks, almost all of us, have a different understanding of how these issues of harassment, sexual abuse, et cetera, sort of play out in the workplace. So I'll definitely be catching up with you a bit later, Jonathan, and thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for including me. Happy holiday.
Same to you.